Hi, my name's Steve Burton from AppDynamics. Today, me and myself and John Martin from Edmunds.com, we're going to talk about how building DevOps with Beer and Whiteboards. How many of you attended this session because it had beer in the title? Whiteboards? No, few people. And DevOps? Yeah, we figured we'd get it accepted with one of the three. So, anyway, I'm going to start a little bit and talk about DevOps and really, like, what is it for me, what I've learned. I've attended many DevOps events. And really, I started things with a session last year, a presentation, around Call of Duty and DevOps. It's on SlideShare. You can kind of download it and get the context of this. But really, it was trying to kind of set the scene about what the challenge was. I tried to kind of put a Call of Duty theme on it and really kind of understand the mission parameters, why people doing DevOps, like what's the big deal? Is it just so like Dev and Ops get along and hug each other and kiss each other? Or was there actual like real business reasons why it had to happen? And people were obviously attending conferences and events. And also looking at the essentials. Again, as we'll talk, beer and whiteboards. But for me, the big question, and it's always been the big question, what does success mean for DevOps? Okay, we can talk about DevOps, we can have different opinions about it. We can look at tools, we can look at processes, collaboration, all of the kind of the nice words we like to talk about. But what does it mean? How do you know if you're successful at DevOps? Okay, how many people in the room have DevOps in their title or practice DevOps? How do you know if you're good at DevOps? What metrics do you use?
Code quality goes up.
Code quality goes up. That's a good metric. Anyone else? Capture metrics. At the back.
Customer satisfaction with both function and operation.
Customer satisfaction. That's a good metric as well. So it kind of got me thinking, what does it mean? And if I'm good at it, how do I get better? And where does this DevOps journey go? And how, more importantly, how are customers getting along with this kind of process? And good old Winston Churchill, one thing I kind of dug out was this quote, and it kind of says a lot about how I see IT and development and really what I've gone through. I started on application support. I moved into development and spent 5 or 6 years kind of living the challenges that a lot of you used to, or maybe working across today. And success is about going from failure to failure without giving up. So it can be a road of failures that we learn from. And really, no one likes to talk about failure. I didn't when I was a developer. I didn't like being someone blaming me, saying it's your problem. This is because of you. We failed. It's all down to you and the line of code you wrote. But how many of you talk about failure today in the audience? As much as you should do. 1, 2 hands. So talking about success is great, but we learn most about failure. And really, the only way you can learn is to measure what failure is and how it impacts you and perhaps your business, so that when you improve over time, you can actually go back and quantify the results and how successful you were. So for example, has anyone been blamed for an application outage or a slowdown? Yeah? How long does it take you to do this? Hours, minutes? Could be days. And this is what generally happens whenever a problem occurs or we fail. Everyone points fingers. One other thing we could do is really look at the common metrics associated with those failures. Like, how long did it take us to resolve that failure? Maybe when operations and development were separate, and when there were a team working together and collaborating. How much more efficient can we solve problems by incorporating DevOps in the culture and the processes? Another good one is mean time between failure. Okay? How long can we keep things consistent, up and running, the customer satisfaction before we actually incur a problem? Can we be proactive enough, working as a team, rather than reactive and always dealing with problems and then troubleshooting? Everyone familiar with this metric? This generally means that everything's healthy and good. if you've got a 99.9% metric, believe it or not, that actually is 8.7 hours of downtime a year in an application if you meet that availability metric. This is probably one of the most abused metrics in IT today, yet a lot of people in operations are held accountable to this particular SLA. Okay? It says nothing about the business health, about the end user experience, the customer satisfaction. It's really about, is the infrastructure up or down? How many of you in the audience track business metrics from your applications? That's good. What type of metrics do you currently track? Revenue? Okay, always a good place to start. If the business is paying you wage, it's good to show what return IT is providing. Throughput? How many transactions you can support, concurrency, at any one time? Is that going up or down over weeks or months? Performance, end user response times, and productivity. This is a big one. If you think all of the issues you may solve or run into every week, every year, okay, if you have say, I don't know, one severity incident a month, and it takes you on average 2 days to resolve that, that's a lot of time and effort you're spending on resolving, and perhaps working as two teams or working as a team to solve problems. If you can solve problems quicker, that translates to a lot of dollars, and that's good for showing the success of collaboration, especially if you're looking for DevOps projects and wants to prove it's actually worth doing. One of our customers, this is their metric for success. This is one of the biggest retailers in North America. Their two key performance metrics is revenue going through the application and response time, and correlating the two. Everyone talks about response time and slowness impacts the business, and 1 second's worth $1 billion. I think it was Amazon said 1 second costs us $1 billion a year. Try and correlate the relationship you see here. As you can see, it got to a point during peak trading hours, and you can see the green line is revenue per minute, and the blue line is response time. Just two simple metrics. One tells the business how well they're doing. The other one tells IT what the performance of the end user response time is. And using metrics like these, you can measure success and failure very easily. And if it's down to DevOps culture and the DevOps processes that you're working on, or maybe the tools or the automation, and getting new functionality into production, you can track very easily the success. Okay? So you get to the end of a year, did we improve, did we not improve? Where didn't we improve? Was it one code release? Was it this code release towards the end of the year? Being able to quantify your impact or the impact of DevOps, okay, that says that you've been successful in DevOps because things have improved. If you never baseline where you've came from or baseline the metrics you've used previously, how can you show that DevOps is worth doing and that you're good at DevOps? So one thing I want to kind of now introduce John, who's kind of been there, who's gone through that journey. He's got a great story to tell about failure, about success, and how he drove a DevOps culture in Edmunds.com. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. Excuse me. So a little bit about Edmunds.com. If you're not familiar with us, we are the online automotive experience. Anything related to new, used hobbies. You just want to know how well that old Datsun that you got will continue to run. We have that kind of information. We were founded in 1966, originally as a print magazine. Believe it or not, our first presence on the internet wasn't even as a website. In 1994, we launched a Gopher space that essentially mimicked our in-print mag. We've currently got about 550 employees working out of sunny Santa Monica, California. And on the average, we usually pull in about 650 uniques a day. Little note about me, just so you don't think I'm standing up here rambling at you for the next half hour. I'm the Senior Director of Production Engineering. It's primarily an operations-based role. I've worked in the .com space for about 15 years now, with the last decade specifically around Java architectures. I've been with Edmunds for just about 8 years. I happen to really love metrics. I like talking about logs, whiteboards, and of course, beer. A little note about our environment. So when you go to edmunds.com, you're interacting with usually one or maybe even more of about 30 of our web applications. We are a Java architecture. We happen to prefer Tomcat. We do have a little bit of WebLogic still kind of sprinkled around. We have no relational databases that are actually powering the website. All of our web apps interact with tools like Solr, Coherence, and we've even started to get our feet wet with Mongo in the last year or two. We are heavily virtualized. We rely on a mix of some old RHEL Zen. In the last year or two, we've gotten pretty good at running our cloud stack VMs. Our primary vendor of choice for a number of years has actually been Dell, but about 18 months ago, we started to invest pretty heavily in Cisco's UCS product. That is actually serving us really well in our cloud stack runways right now. Really just a kind of last minute addition to the comment here that this afternoon we actually threw like our entire website against UCS and cloud stack and let that run for quite a while with a lot of success. So kudos to the team back home. But you know, the deal is we didn't just kind of wake up with these environments, right? There was a lot of pain kind of getting to what we have today. So that's kind of what I want to focus on this afternoon. Here's the really short story. We fumbled. We fumbled a lot. We made a huge amount of mistakes. We really perfected the facepalm. It was really through those events that we really began to take some really hard look about the way that we were working with each other, the technology that we were using in the process, and really needed to change the way that we operated in order to really be successful. So let's talk about some of those facepalms. A topic that's probably really familiar to a lot of you is growing pains in your infrastructure, right? When I started at Edmunds in 2005, we had about 30 servers to our name. In 2006, a major revamp of the website at the time saw that number jump from 30 to 300. And for the next few years, that number kind of stayed in that 300 to 400 range, right? It was pretty good. Didn't have too many problems with that. We learned how to manage it pretty well. But then as you can see in 2009, 2010, and the years since, we have started growing so extremely rapidly that it was really tough for us to keep a handle on everything that was coming our way. Now, I'm sure like a lot of you, we continued to grow the infrastructure, but we didn't really grow the administrative team that was responsible for keeping track of those things. So we had lots of problems with things like configuration drift, right? We'd gotten really good at using Kickstart, so we knew how to bootstrap our systems really well. We got ourselves up and going, but from there it was a lot of handcrafted work to keep the environments running. This was a huge pain in the ass for the folks in ops. It was an even more unbearable experience for our developers, right? Because there was a huge amount of back and forth about what was wrong. Was it the system? Was it the environment? Was it the new code that was put on it? These were really hard problems for us. We started to have some sort of inkling that we needed to wrangle this in some way. So we became BladeLogic customers. We were BladeLogic customers for a number of years. We were also starting to automate our build and deployments with tools like Anthill Pro. And those served us okay, but quite honestly, they didn't solve the problem entirely for us. But I'm going to get back to that point in a minute. Probably another really common pain point for everybody is communication between silos, right? And there's one particular event at Edmunds that really stood out to me that kind of really highlights how bad of a problem we had going on. So in 2007, we went through a major site redesign called Edmunds 2.0. And this was a project where the technology groups were essentially supposed to deliver a CMS platform to the business, right? Up until this point, our editorial teams were only really making content changes to the website in our once-a-month book of business releases. And as an online publisher, you can imagine that that's actually a really difficult spot to be in, right? Because our editorial teams would go out to an auto show, and they would bring back all sorts of write-ups about what they had seen, lots of nice photos, but we couldn't actually get them out onto the site until that next release cycle. And that's a real nightmare, right? So the software engineering teams kind of started going to work on building this functionality for the business. They spent about 6 months kind of going through all of the functional requirements and get everything built out. And then about 2 months before we were supposed to go live with this, we ran our first performance test. All right, so problem number one, obviously I'm sure you get, was that we waited 2 months to start running our first performance test. But what we uncovered really quickly was that this app was not going to scale, right? The amount of traffic that we were expecting it to support, it just wasn't going to fly. Now, the other bind that we were in was that this CMS solution that we had chosen, it wasn't ours. We hadn't written it. It was some third party's integration into our own platform. So our developers kind of had their hands bound a little bit. So what do you do in a situation like this, right? I mean, you've committed to the delivery date. It has to go. The devs kind of have their hands bound. There really isn't a whole lot that you could do at the code level. So the ops guys kind of stepped in. We doubled the amount of application infrastructure, and we threw a big hardware caching appliance in front of it. That was enough to actually get it off the ground. The project launched on time. Technology delivered for the business. But there's a real problem here, right? We actually doubled our application infrastructure. Again, no change in the size of the administrative teams responsible for it. We'd incurred a huge expense, right? This was like one of those things that still stands out to me as a major communication failure between ops and dev, right? That we waited until that very last minute to really understand what it was that we needed in order to make this a successful project for the business without becoming an extreme expense. So the business really didn't let us slow down. Fast forward a few years, and we're going to go through another redesign. So this time, we're going to do a complete rewrite of our entire platform. Right? We scrapped our entire code base and we started from scratch. The good news is that in 2010, we had done a lot to really improve the communication between the teams, but we were still having some problems, right? We had automated the host provisioning, right? We had automated build and deploys, but those things weren't coupled together. And to make matters worse, as we were building out these runways for us to kind of validate this new platform, our QA runway and an environment that we called the beta environment, where we were actually like testing live user traffic through, these things were being touched by hand every single day by administrators and developers that were working with the business to keep things going through this platform redesign. So again, communication was good, but we were still doing a lot of manual work. And even worse, we weren't putting back all of those manual changes that we were making into the build or deployment systems. So when it came time to launch that project, and we tried to build a production runway, we thought that we were building that production environment with the same bits that we had used to build QA and beta. But we were way off. So a lot of us spent the next 3 months in a war room trying to figure out this problem, trying to put those pieces together and make it work. How many people have spent 3 months in a war room? Yeah, you don't smell good when you come out, do you? No, you don't. So we really wanted to figure this problem out. This was 2 major initiatives in a row that a lot of us had kind of gone through, and we really knew that there had to be a better way. We knew that we could stop working like this, and we could start working like this, right? That to me seems like an awesome way to spend the day. We really wanted to get out of the war room. 3 months in a war room, hell, a day, two in a war room, you guys know how much that sucks. We really wanted to be here, right? This is the Daily Pint in Santa Monica. Any of you ever come down to Santa Monica, hit me up. We'll go hit up the Daily Pint, all right? The Pint is the place where we went and we started talking these ideas out, right? We started spawning all sorts of ways that we could deal with these problems that we were having. And disagreements, certainly had them, but we dealt with them with like good, friendly gestures, right? We really kind of started to talk this out together, talking it out together, right? The next day, we would go back to the office and we would jump in front of a whiteboard. The whiteboard is the most underrated tool that you already have, right? You have lots of tools at your disposal. There are a huge amount of them that I'm sure you're going to go back from Velocity in your mind that you go and need to try out. I hope this is the one that you try out first, right? Major kudos to any of you that are the first one in a difficult conversation to get up and pick that marker and start writing on the whiteboard to sort that problem out. And that's what we did, right? We started talking about how to fill in the communication gaps between these silos that existed, right? The silos themselves, okay, they were a problem. But the fact that there is no communication going between them, that was the real issue, right? How do we tie our infrastructure build system, our configuration management solutions, to our artifact build and deployment services, right? How do we make it so that we aren't spending the entirety of our day firefighting? So a few of us kind of got a little radical, quite honestly. We decided that what we were going to do was stop thinking about being separate teams. And we got to do it, right? There is a little bit of a catch. We created two teams, one in ops and one in dev. And these groups were essentially the points of communication for each sides of the technology house to come and communicate with the other, right? What we realized was that trying to make a radical change where you just say, no, we are going to work completely differently and get 150 of your dev and ops folks just to start working differently was not something that was going to work for us. And so we created these intermediary groups, production engineering and automation engineering, ops and dev, to basically play proxy. This ended up working out very well. The thing is, when we started doing this, those two teams, they didn't see themselves as being ops and dev, right? We were technologists really trying to solve a problem. And so as we kind of started to dole out the work, there really wasn't this notion that, you know, I'm in ops and therefore I can't write the code that's necessary to solve this problem that I want to solve, right? Or I'm on the dev side and I'm not allowed to have access to that server in order to help you with the work that I know needs to be done, right? We ditched it. And that worked so extremely well for us. That communication issue, gone, right? The gaps in our services, eliminated, right? We built tooling that helped link all of these things together and started to erase those problems that we had when we would try to build out that production environment in 2010. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the tools that we've used as part of the process. In 2010, we ditched BMC and we kind of got religion around config management with Chef. We started leveraging tools like Splunk and AppDynamics to kind of really force discussions around metrics and data and making certain that when we were talking with one another, we were talking about things that were actually observable and not just things that we were thinking or feeling, right? We use obviously a lot of other tools. We use Jenkins and CloudStack and Xenos, and we're big Hadoop users now as well. Here's something that's actually really important, I think. your tools actually don't define your culture, right? But those tools are used by the humans that actually help shape your culture, right? So your selection of tools, you might not actually think that they're going to make some sort of big and radical change for you. And that's kind of true, but that depends on the individuals that are actually using them and how they get leveraged and how everything ultimately get pieces together. Let me move along. Communicating with metrics. Okay, this was probably like one of the biggest drivers to fixing that communication problem, right? Because now we were starting to become a more data-driven culture, right? You could come into a conversation and you could talk with your gut, right? You could talk with instinct, but you had to be able to back that up with data from these tools that we were using, right? It's actually really kind of funny because the disagreements that we were having, we were now no longer having them about disagreements of the gut. We were actually having disagreements about our interpretation of the data that we were gathering. Because of this, we were now able to kind of drive accountability. We were able to show that this service over here is actually what it is that is actually what is affecting a performance problem over there, and we could directly tie the developer of service A over here with that issue over there. And it really did a lot to kind of increase the number of people that were capable of pitching in to fix a problem. That was actually a really big thing, and I'll come back to that in just a second. This was really important, right? So Steve was talking about how a lot of people really don't like to talk about their failures. They only want to talk about their success. I think that's extremely short-sighted. I think that unless you're actually really open about what mistakes that you're making, I don't know. Like I said, that just feels very short-sighted to me. Be very frank and share your experience with others, because I trust, or rather I expect that a lot of us are experiencing the same things in some very, very similar ways. So we'd made a bunch of these changes, and it was kind of time to start putting this to the test, right? And like most companies out there today, Edmunds began dedicating resources to getting us in the cloud, right? And we decided that the way that we were going to tackle this was by creating 2 new teams, right? One team would take on on-premise cloud with CloudStack, and another team would go out and try and tackle a public cloud. We happen to choose AWS. And what we would attempt to do was take these learnings, take these tools, and try to build in both of these solutions, and eventually make certain that we could bring them back together using the same tool set, right? And so that's what we did. Now, I think everybody knows that working in the cloud is a little bit of a different experience if you're just working on bare metal infrastructure or even your own localized virtual instances, right? But because of that familiar tooling that we now had, because of the improved communications, we were actually able to measure our success through both of these initiatives. This was actually really awesome. It's really cool to be able to sit down with your CIO and show him, how it was that you were able to do these things that you had done with all of the work that you had been given time to invest in earlier. It was actually really, really good for us to be able to show those metrics, right? Let me shift on a little bit of a personal note, if I could. I'm sure, like a lot of you, right? We've kind of built careers and reputations with coworkers and bosses and executives, with our ability to kind of keep a cool head in a firefight, right? I was kind of no different, honestly. like I said, I've been in this space for a number of years now. I've dealt with a lot of fires. I still do deal with a lot of fires on a daily basis. But one of the things that has happened because of the change in culture, right? Because of the way that we have begun changing the way that we work with one another, because we've increased the number of accountable individuals responsible for kind of the care and feeding of our infrastructure and our website, I've kind of found that, my time is freeing up a little bit. And what I now get to do with some of that free time is really begin to focus on giving back to the business. Trying to figure out, increasing kind of my business acumen, right? How do I actually begin to turn the work that I'm doing into real dollars for my company? Kind of go from this to this, right? Maybe not that bad, all right? I don't want to be carrying a leather satchel around with me all day. No offense if you do. Hopefully you get my point, though, right? In the day and the age of the internet, right, technologists, those of us that used to just be like back office workers, we are actually now at the forefront of our businesses, right? We help set the direction. We have a direct impact on revenue, right? These things, we may not have the capacity to work on those things, to focus on those avenues on a daily basis if we're spending all of our time firefighting infrastructure problems, bad deployments, right? We needed a better way to start working with one another so that we could really begin turning all of that into real value for the business. So now that I've had a little bit of that time, just a couple of things that I have noticed through these cloud projects in the last few months. First, the cloud isn't free, right? If you are currently a heavy virtualized environment on-premise and you have gotten quite comfortable at just spinning up a new host because, well, you just can now, right? You've made infrastructure provisioning a rapid process, right? You have made it self-service within your company. Without a good lack of education on, what that self-service actually costs somebody at an infrastructure level, that can get very expensive very quickly, right? How many people actually know what it costs per host in their environment? Nice. Because I think that can be a really hard thing to do. It can be very tough to calculate, right? We run different configurations with different pieces of software, right? And a lot of that software you pay a premium for. It's absolutely a necessity to have, but it begins to cost you as you start to scale out, right? So start looking for freebie alternatives, right? Do you have to have that paid for operating system? Can you run the freebie equivalent? That monitoring solution you have? Sorry, Steve. Do you need to have it deployed everywhere? In my case, the answer is actually yes. But you need to be looking for those things. Here's the thing, right? Until you actually have the capacity, the time to be able to begin investigating those things, you're just spending money. So it's been a few years now that we've kind of changed up our processes. We've linked up our tools. We've started working differently, right? I actually get to work a lot like this every day now. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, there are still fires, right? But this is more of what my day is like. And there are a bunch of us that are here from Edmonds. I don't know how you guys feel, whether you feel that you're firefighting every day, but I'll bet you actually feel pretty awesome, right? So Steve was asking, how do you actually kind of measure the success, right? Well, I'll take that challenge. So a few metrics. Let's talk about 2011 versus 2012. We didn't hit those 4 nines, that holy metric. You're quite right, Steve. Every ops person is always held accountable for that availability, that holy metric of the 4 nines. We didn't get there, but we still bumped ourselves by 4. The number of high-severity incidents, cut by 50%. The number of tickets to our help desk, cut by 50%. The mean time resolution in pre-production areas where we were spending an immense amount of time trying to solve problems, also drastically reduced. The time that it takes us to build an environment has been reduced from 3 months down to less than a week. Right? I can't even tell you how much time and money that saved us. In terms of the operating costs, this is something I'm going to get back to you on. This is a really big kind of focus area for me at the moment, and one of the ways that I feel like I've been afforded an opportunity to grow as a technologist because of these cultural changes that we've made. And as for team morale, well, we got out of here. We got into here, right? So where do we go next? Like I said, we continue to put that focus on really giving back to the business. And I know we're actually kind of running out on time, so catch me outside in the hall, and I'll tell you some of the other things that we're going to be doing with it. So, cool. Thank you for your time.